Good evening. I'm in Plymouth today, and I've pre-recorded this. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon because I'm going to be on stage here at 6 o'clock. And arriving in Plymouth today, it reminded me, back in the early 80s, I used to come here a lot. Yep, I'd come here, and thousands of people would come here every year to go angling. Big angling fleet, lots of money coming into the city, now reduced to a handful of boats, let alone what's happened to the commercial sector. And you come to places like this, and you realise that with species like haddock, the French have got 90% of the quota, and we've got 10% of the quota. All the more reason for leaving the common fisheries policy. Also struck, of course, Plymouth, famous, Francis Drake playing bowls, the Spanish Armada, but you can bring that all the way up to even the Falklands War, and of course this great naval tradition of this city with its big dockyards, and yet defence barely been mentioned so far in this entire general election campaign. Why? Well, of course, Jeremy Corbyn doesn't really even believe in defence. We've got the SNP, of course, making arguments to unilaterally get rid of nuclear weapons, something Corbyn would like to do, but Labour won't quite let him. And then we got the Conservatives, who, in their manifesto launch yesterday, and bear in mind, they've always prided themselves as being the party of defence, but I think David Cameron finished that off, because what we've seen since 2010 are huge contractions in Army, Navy and Air Force. And in that manifesto yesterday, I don't even see a firm commitment to maintaining 2% of our budget on defence spending, which of course is the NATO minimum. And we only make 2% these days because we add in all the ceremonial stuff as well. And clearly, under Boris Johnson, we will see further declines in our defence capabilities. That, I think, is terrible. To me, it's rather like not paying the fire insurance on your house, because you just never know what is going to happen in the world. So I'll talk a little bit today about defence when I'm here in Plymouth, but actually I'm saving most of what I've got to say about defence for the NATO summit. It's going to be on from December the 2nd to December the 4th. President Trump, of course, is coming across. He is less than happy about what is happening, the growth of a European defence union, the absolute refusal now of countries like France and Germany to pay the 2%, whether you're big or small, but the 2% fee to be part of that club and basically to have American protection. And that is all now being put at risk by the European project, by the European Defence Union, call it a European army if you want, and looking quite clear to me that Mrs May's intention was that we would stay part of that European Defence Union. And I don't see in the end how we can be part of that and part of NATO. But more on that from me come December the 2nd. So it was the big launch yesterday, Boris's big manifesto launch. Oh, I had to laugh. I had to laugh. They're very good at copying everything I do. There was Matt Hancock sitting in the front row. And I tweeted 2 weeks ago when I was sitting on a platform wearing my Union Jack socks, for which I've become quite well known. Even gave Jean-Claude Juncker a pair for Christmas last year. He won't wear them. But I tweeted, I wonder how long it is before they'll copy me and start wearing Union Jack socks and blow me down. There was Matthew Hancock yesterday wearing a pair of Union Jack socks. I was also struck that other parts of the manifesto I recognised because they were a straight washover from UKIP's 2015 manifesto, talking about getting rid of, or at least reducing, hospital parking charges. They even picked up the bit, where we said we didn't think that plastics and waste should be exported from this country to go into landfill sites in China or be dumped at sea. They even copied that and put it in the manifesto. And I suppose encouragingly, it also said we will leave by December 2020, the European Union, and a future trading relationship will not be based on regulatory and political alignment. They're the reasons that we're not standing in 317 seats, because whether they mean it or not, they are actually saying the right things. But if we don't get a strong Brexit Party vote and voice in Parliament, they'll be able to simply backtrack, and we could find ourselves in a year's time back in this terrible impasse and mess with years more negotiations. Overall, Boris's launch, Boris's manifesto was pretty tame, clearly not taking any risks whatsoever, I guess because he doesn't need to. Whereas Mr. Corbyn, having not even talked about it in his manifesto launch, which, by the way, compared with 2017, when his campaign began just to take off, this time it has bombed, suddenly finds a promise for £58 billion to compensate women whose pensions, of course, as they see it, have been taken away from them. And I do have some sympathy because I think retrospective changes to law are wrong. But just think on this for a moment. There's even an EU angle to this, because under European Union law, and we've been part of it for a very long time, you are not allowed in any way to discriminate between men and women. So part of the reason that those pensions for women and men got brought into line, despite the fact it's been different ever since 1908, when our old age pension system came in, is because, once again, we're complying with the EU way of doing things. It's the same for car insurance. Insurers now are not supposed to discriminate between men and women when charging premiums for driving cars, which of course is completely and utterly nuts, because women are much safer drivers than men, particularly young women, and should pay a much lower premium. But that's the extent to which our country has been bound in by the EU. It's why I'm arguing that to break free, to have a clean break from the institutions of the Union, not to be aligned in terms of laws, is the only way we get a proper functioning democracy back in our country. What I can also tell you from going around the country, and I've said this before, but it really hit me over the weekend. And, I was in Easington, I was in Sedgefield, I was in Hartlepool, is the extent to which we are really hitting that Corbyn vote. People in those seats are saying, yep, we are going to vote for you. Equally, people who've been Labour all their lives, who appear to be very confused as to what to do. A lot of these old pit towns that I was visiting, very patriotic places. We were at Seaham yesterday, where they built that amazing Tommy statue on the front, and you can see the sense of civic pride that they've got in their past and their identity and who they are. And I met lots of people who'd, served in the army at some point in the last 40, 50 years, all making the point they just can't vote for a bloke who was friendly with the IRA. So Labour, I think Labour are in bigger trouble than the newspapers, the media, or the so-called polling organisations will tell you. I say so-called because I think actually the polling at the moment is a complete joke. The methodology doesn't make any sense. Don't believe any of it. But believe me when I tell you that the Brexit Party vote in those Labour constituencies, yeah, we're getting some Conservatives voting for us, of course we are. People who can't stand the deal, and people who see that, in fact, one of the reasons for 3.5 years of failure is the fact that Conservative government has not done its job properly, didn't go for a clean break, and Mrs May took us down completely the wrong route. I mean, of that there is no question at all. But what we're really seeing in these seats is a lot of people who are actually Labour voters coming to us. So it's probably 75 to 80% of the Brexit Party support in these northern seats that I'm visiting, and it'll be the same in Wales and the Midlands, I guess here in Plymouth too. That vote is coming from the Labour Party. So not only do we now start to become the challengers in some of these seats, some of the 130 seats that the Conservatives have never won and never, ever will win, but I also saw just the beginnings on Saturday of some tactical voting for us, of Conservatives saying, well, actually, we normally vote Conservative, but we can see that you've got a chance here of beating the incumbent Labour Remainer. Bear in mind, some of these seats voted 70% Leave. And I saw just the beginnings of some Conservative voters saying, well, we can't win here, so we better vote for you. And, if you can beat Labour, wouldn't that be fantastic? And also, given, their own concerns about the party they voted for, if you can keep Boris and hold him to account, that would be even better too. So I saw some early signs of that, and clearly that's something we've got to work on over the course of the next few weeks. And in other seats, In other seats where the Conservatives will be seen to be the clear challengers to Labour, well, the fact that we are digging into a Labour vote that will never vote Conservative, not if you paid them in many of those former mining areas, then you could argue we're actually making it easier for them. Look, I've got no great faith or trust in the Conservative Party whatsoever. They've been a Remain party for 50 years. They're only talking about leave because we've dragged them kicking and screaming in this direction. And they've only toughened up the policy in the last few weeks just to try and get us off their backs. I know that. I'm very sceptical, very cynical about the Conservative Party. But for Boris Johnson now, having made a series of promises, he's going to begin to know that he's got to keep to them. And certainly if the Brexit Party is there and he fails, then you'll see a swing towards the Brexit Party, rather like you saw from Theresa May earlier on this year. So be optimistic in one way, that Mr. Corbyn and the Marxists are not going to get into Downing Street. That isn't going to happen. I think the decisions that we've made in the last couple of weeks pretty much guarantee that Boris is going to win, but just him winning is not enough to make us a genuinely independent country. So for me, for us, for the party, it's full steam ahead over the course of the next less than 3 weeks now. So I'll be visiting Labour seats every single day. It's Plymouth today, it's Barnsley tomorrow, it's Doncaster on Wednesday, it's going to be Hull on Thursday, and then this Sunday there's a 7-way leaders debate. I don't think Boris will take part in that. Corbyn, I think, probably will. So I'm going to be there on Sunday night doing that live debate. It's difficult with 7. You have to ask yourself why I applied there, because they're quite a small party in Wales, let alone across the rest of the United Kingdom. And I'll be getting ready for that. So I think, we made a big strategic choice as to what we wanted to do. And I think there is a growing sense and feeling that we're beginning to have a real impact in these Labour seats that we're targeting around the country. I feel, going around talking to people, I feel really pretty good about the whole direction of this, really pretty good about where this is going. Now remember, send in your questions. I haven't been with you for a couple of days. Send in your questions, and you can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Send in your questions. I'll select some overnight that are the most commonly occurring questions. I'll answer those tomorrow when I'm up in Barnsley, and we'll talk to some people there just about what's happened to that town. I do sense that the gap between North and South has never, ever been greater than it is today. And I think places like Barnsley have been left behind in the most astonishing way. But no one's cared, because the Conservatives can never win in Barnsley, and Labour have taken these places for granted. And it's our job to change all of that. That's part of the political revolution that we are trying to foster, trying to engender in the Brexit Party. So I'm off out now to do some campaigning with Anne Widdecombe, the redoubtable Anne Widdecombe, who was born and bred in Plymouth, and she's standing here against an incumbent Remainer Labour MP. And I'll see you tomorrow, same time, from Barnsley.